let's explore a what-if scenario, a hypothetical future flashpoint that could put the United States and Venezuela on a direct collision course. We're going to piece together how a disputed election and, you guessed it, the world's largest oil reserves could spark a pretty dramatic military intervention. So let's dive in.
All right, to get a feel for this, let's start with this really provocative statement from a hypothetical 2025. This isn't just about politics. It's a declaration about ownership. You know, this one quote signals a huge shift in U.S. policy, and honestly, it's the key to understanding the whole crisis we're about to unpack.
And that shift in policy? Well, it could lead directly to this. In the scenario we're looking at, things escalate with, frankly, breathtaking speed. By late 2025, you've got a naval blockade, a massive military deployment, and then, boom, January 2026 hits with strikes on the Capitol and the capture of a head of state. It's a shocking chain of events. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth do we get to this point? To answer that, we've got to hit rewind. The seeds of this future crisis were really planted in the very real political turmoil of Venezuela's 2024 presidential election. To get a handle on the hypothetical military action, you first have to understand what went down then. So for years leading up to 2024, the political situation in Venezuela was, well, it was getting pretty bad. Under Nicolás Maduro, the government was really consolidating its power. We're talking about packing the courts, creating alternate legislatures, basically anything to sideline the opposition. It created this incredibly tense, polarized environment just in time for an election.
But look, the opposition wasn't giving up. They held their own primaries and overwhelmingly picked Maria Corina Machado to be their single candidate. Of course, the government turned around and promptly disqualified her. After a bit of a scramble, the opposition managed to unify behind a new candidate, a former diplomat named Edmundo González. And just like that, the stage was set for a huge showdown.
And right here, this is the absolute heart of the crisis. After everyone voted, two completely contradictory results came out. The government's electoral council, the CNE, said Maduro won. But the opposition, armed with copies of the official tally sheets right from the polling stations, they claimed a massive landslide victory for their guy, González. You've got one election, but two totally different realities. So in the chaos that followed, Maduro just refused to go anywhere. Protests started popping up all over the country, and then the government issued an arrest warrant for the opposition's candidate, Edmundo González, who had to flee into exile. The crisis didn't get solved. It just became this really tense, frozen stalemate. And this is where the story takes a big turn. Because while all of this political drama was unfolding, there was another factor just lurking beneath the surface. The one thing that makes Venezuela a constant focus of global attention, its absolutely immense oil wealth.
Just let this number sink in for a second. 303 billion barrels. That is more than Saudi Arabia, more than any other country on the planet. So this isn't just a political crisis, it's a crisis happening on top of the single biggest prize in the entire global energy market, a prize that could literally shift geopolitical power.
You know, the U.S. and Venezuela have a long, really complicated history when it comes to oil. American companies helped build their industry way back when. But the big turning point came in 2007. That's when President Hugo Chavez nationalized the entire sector, seizing all those foreign assets. Now, in the hypothetical future we're talking about, a new U.S. administration wouldn't see that as a sovereign country's decision. No, they'd see it as straight-up theft. Which brings us right back to the military action. You have the unresolved political mess combined with this enormous oil prize, and that creates the perfect storm for an intervention. So how would an operation like this actually work? Well, according to these sources we're looking at, it follows a pretty clear four-step playbook. Okay, first, you need a public justification. The official reason for going in wouldn't be oil. Of course not. It would be narco-terrorism. The U.S. could point to existing indictments against Maduro's government for allegedly turning the country into a narco state. So you frame the whole thing as a massive law enforcement action, not a war over resources. And here's the plan itself. Step 1. Capture Maduro. Get rid of the leadership. Step 2. U.S. officials literally run the country for a while to oversee a proper transition. Step 3. Seize control of all the oil assets as, quote, reimbursement. And finally, Step 4. Bring in the big U.S. oil companies to fix the broken infrastructure and get the crude flowing again. I mean, it is an incredibly direct plan.
So a plan this blunt is naturally going to create two very different stories about what's really going on. Is this a mission to restore democracy and fight crime, or is it something else entirely?
On one hand, you have the official story. This is a noble mission to restore democracy, fight narco-terrorism, and bring stability. But on the other hand, you have the critics, and they're going to say, come on, this is a straightforward oil grab. They'd argue the criminal charges are just a convenient smokescreen to justify taking back the assets that were nationalized way back in 2007. So what about the rest of the world? I mean, Venezuela's big allies, Russia and China, they would definitely condemn this kind of action. Loudly. But would they actually do anything? Probably not. Russia has already stretched super thin with its war in Ukraine. And China, which is owed about $60 billion by Venezuela, they'd much rather use their economic power than get into an open conflict. The international reaction would likely be noisy, but at the end of the day, limited.
And this quote, this one really just says it all, doesn't it? In another hypothetical statement from 2026, the economic motive is laid completely bare. The wealth from the ground is going to be shared between the people of Venezuela and the United States. It's pitched as a win-win, but it's a win-win that would start with a military takeover.
Which really leaves us with this fundamental question. When a country with such immense resources is caught in a deep political crisis, where do you draw the line between genuine aid and pure ambition? It's a question with no easy answers. And in a scenario like this one, it's a question that could define the future of an entire continent.